Hey guys, Carmine Bianco, WagerTalk. What do you do when there's no sports on? You get in the kitchen, you cook for family, stay quarantined. So what am I doing today? I'm putting together a video on the perfect tomato sauce. If you're having friends over and you want to serve a pasta dish, this is for Kelly in Vegas, for Minty, and of course, my fellow Italian in Vegas, Marco. Marco's never said no to a good meal, so I think he'll enjoy this video. We're going to start this video from it's going to be broken down into like three parts, but the first part I'm going to bring you is basically the ingredients that you need to put together in order for this dish to work. All right, we're going to talk about some of the ingredients as I get the oven going here. Obviously, one of the first things is you want to use a very good olive oil, basically 2 tablespoons. I have my own extra virgin olive oil I got in an Italian store, but basically 2 tablespoons, and you get that going. And then what you need is garlic. Use about, whether you like it or not, just finely chop up like I did, 4 or 5 cloves of garlic, and get that garlic into the frying pan or into the pot, and obviously cooking. The main reason for this obviously is you want to build depth of flavor. So that's the base of your sauce right there, is the olive oil and the garlic. You get that going, you get that cooking. Ours will get going in a second. You get that cooking. Next thing, once we get to it, the tomatoes, most important part. San Marzano tomatoes. You get them at your local grocery store. They come canned from Italy. It's the best tomato to use for sauce. Two 28-ounce cans. You can make sauce for 4 to 6 people if you're having family over or friends over. The San Marzano tomato, as you'll see, I'm just going to pull one out here. Essentially, these are whole tomatoes which will break down. They're peeled tomatoes which will break down in the sauce. Smart thing to do, obviously, when you open a can of the tomatoes, stick your finger in the tomato, taste it. If it tastes basically like let's say a watered down ketchup, for lack of a better word, and it's not sour, the tomatoes are good, and you start using them. The other reason is, like I said, low acidity for this tomato. So think about the fact that sometimes you have a late meal, you go to your favorite Italian restaurant or somewhere. It's 8 o'clock. You have some pasta. A little later on, you're full, but you feel like you have like heartburn. That's the acidity of the tomato. Plum tomatoes are like that. Some people try and put like hothouse tomatoes, any other type of tomato. San Marzano, low acidity, best tomato to use when you're creating your own sauce, because that, again, it's the base. And then as you acquire basically different recipes and you try different things with your sauce, the tomato is the base. The tomato, the garlic, the extra virgin olive oil, start with those first. I'll be back in a second. All right, so the garlic has been cooking up there for about 60 seconds, which is the most you really want before you add the tomatoes. And the reason for that is you don't want that garlic to burn and turn a darker color. You want it to still be able to, some of that flavor come out and into the sauce. So you'll add your cans of sauce. Now I know some people will take a can of sauce when they do this, or a jar of sauce, and they'll add some water to it to get the rest out of it. Don't do that. Please don't do that. You're basically changing the recipe. You're adding water to your sauce. Not a good idea. As far as spices, obviously you want to go with some cracked black pepper and some salt, about a tablespoon of that. You're going to want some fresh basil. Basil comes in your stores, similar like this. You can go out, buy the basil, it's fresh. Whatever you do, do not wash your basil. Take a table napkin or a towel, wet it slightly, and you can just run it across quickly. Do not wash the basil, because you're basically going to lose a lot of that flavor that comes with it. Chop it up, save it for later. Don't add your herbs to the sauce until later on. Essentially, you're going to cook everything out of it. Parsley. Basically, you can find it at the store as well too. Chop it up fine. You can never have enough parsley for this. So this is about half a cup for this recipe. Another thing you're going to add in once this sauce gets going and it's going nicely. Now, I did mention that those are whole tomatoes in there. It's going to break down as this sauce continues to cook over 3 hours, 4 hours, and there'll be little bits and pieces. Again, these are peeled tomatoes. You don't want that peel on them. There's nothing worse than having to fish it out of your teeth at some point. The next thing you're going to add is you can pick these up in stores as well too, whether it's a specialty store or your grocery store should have it. It's a concentrated tomato paste. Very important. It just helps build again the thickness of your sauce as it cooks for 3 to 4 hours, and it's essentially the same thing. You're looking to basically to go about 2 tablespoons of this. So once you're used to sort of measuring it out, you can sort of go by eye on this and measure it out. I'll be back in a second with some more directions. All right, so it's been going for about an hour now. At this point, I usually will try and add some of the cracked pepper and salt into it. I'll also add a little bit of oregano, so essentially almost like a couple pinches of each into the sauce. And you can see, if you're doing this at home, that the tomatoes are starting to break up in there. Obviously, the garlic is still cooking, doing what it's supposed to be doing, adding some flavor to this. We're going to leave this be. And I guess while we're waiting for it, what else is there to do but have some wine? All right, sauce is coming along. We're about 90 minutes in with the sauce. I'll get some other things ready. Another part of the meal, if you want to add, some people will add meatballs to their meal into their sauce, which is good. But obviously, you don't get frozen meatballs. A lot of the stores will sell packages of like say 6, 8, or 12 fresh meatballs. Those are obviously a lot better. Stovetop, you just kind of in a frying pan with a little bit of olive oil, just sear them a little bit so they're a little brown on the outside, and toss them in the sauce and just let them cook for 2 hours in the sauce. By the time the sauce is done, the meatballs are done, and the sauce is in that meatball, so it's not one of those dry meatballs and stuff. We're having some Camus. That's our wine of choice today. Now, I'm going to put the computer screen down a bit. For those of you who are vegan, you're not going to want to watch this part of it. For those of you that obviously like meat with your meal, I like to do, and I talked about this one with Marco. Marco loves this from when he was a kid growing up, so was I. Our parents did something that was called braciole. Braciole is basically a veal cutlet or a beef cutlet. I'm using veal scallopini as this example, but it's beat down, it's flat, and you'll add obviously things to it. I'm going to put the computer screen down here, so just have a look. And essentially, this has been seasoned. What I like to do is, this is hot salami from Calabria, so you can get it either mild or hot. I like to put that in there. Put a little bit of parsley in there, and then the one thing that really brings it all together is Parmesan cheese. Sprinkle some Parmesan cheese in there, and then you're basically rolling it up. You're going to roll this up. You're going to sear it in a frying pan the same way. We're going to add a couple toothpicks. Back in the day, our parents used to actually tie it up with string. Obviously, I'm not going to do that. But toothpicks are good enough, and you'll see there's 3 of them there. I'll sear those in about 30 minutes, and then I'll add them to the rest of the pasta and allow that to cook a little longer. All right, guys, I cooked up the braciole. I'm just going to give you an idea of when I talked about what it should look like and just kind of searing the outside of it. I'll just tilt the camera a little bit, and as you'll see, and let me lift it up here for you, you can see that that's just it's a little brown on the outside. You don't want to overcook it. The whole reason for that is quite simple. You overcook the meat, and then you still have to put it in the sauce. You're just going to turn it completely dry. This way, even though the inside of it is still a little red and raw, it's going to cook in the sauce. It's going to absorb that sauce, that garlic, that olive oil, the spices that we put in there, the parsley, oregano, salt, and pepper. And it's going to bring all the flavors together. The whole idea of this is you're not going to a store picking up for lack of a better word, a bottle of ragu, tossing it in, warming it up for 15 minutes, watching it boil, and then say, all right, pasta's ready. Let's go. Let's eat. You want the flavors in it. I'm going to show you in a second how those full San Marzano tomatoes that I put in earlier have started to break down in the sauce. And you can see it. It smells absolutely fantastic. Give me a minute here. I'm going to have another drink, and then we're going to pop it up and so you guys can see it. All right, guys, continuing on with the sauce, I just wanted to show you guys what it's starting to look like. So I'm going to tilt this camera. Hopefully I don't ruin my laptop here, but we'll do the best we can. Just a second. So as you can see, the sauce is obviously cooking. Now, if you look at the tomatoes, it's essentially started to turn into a tomato paste. The tomatoes have all broken down. You can see the bits of garlic that are in there. It is coming out exactly the way we want it to come out. Now, here's the thing with this. Some people, you might be looking and go, well, I don't like even like the little chunks of tomato in my plate or on my pasta. Well, what you can do is you can essentially take one of those immerse blenders or whatever. You can stick it into the sauce at the end, but before you add the basil and the parsley, because you don't want to chop that up, but at the end, when your sauce is finished, you can put that in there and just blend it all up, give it a smoother context, and then from there you add your basil and your parsley. All right, guys, we're back. We're just a little shade over 3 hours that this has been cooking. Just give you a look. The meat has gone in, just to give you an idea of what it looks like. So, and you can see when I lift this up that the sauce that I talked to you about with these types of tomatoes, it really thickens up very well. So, as you can see now, hopefully you can see it. The meat is in there and is covered in the sauce, but the sauce, as you can see, has really thickened up. So at this point now, the sauce is probably like 30 minutes out from being ready. If you missed anything in the video, don't worry about it. I'm going to have, at the end of this video, there's only one part of this video left, which is the part where I do the fresh pasta. It's fresh fettuccine. You can get it at any one of your local grocery stores that they cover or sell fresh pasta. So we'll have that there. I'll show you how to prepare that, and then sort of the finished product. And then I will have the recipe as far as what you need in order to do this and the times in which you need to add everything. So hang tight and we'll be back with the last segment. So before we actually go to that last segment, I just wanted to mention, if you're using, when we're talking about herbs, and obviously you need parsley, you need basil, you can use some thyme. I don't use that. Oregano, obviously, I recommend. If you don't want to go and buy fresh ones, you can use the dried herbs. The thing is, just make sure you don't put when I put the recipe up, you don't put the same amount of herbs for dried. Obviously, the dried herbs are more concentrate in flavor, so it'll overpower the sauce. If you're using the fresh one, always use it towards the end. The taste is so much better. Just think about the fact that if you go to an Italian restaurant and they bring you your meal and they bring your pasta dish and you see some fresh parsley sprinkled on the top of it, yes, it's to add color to the plate, but it's also because from the point where they put it on to the point where they bring it out to you, it is cooking a little bit on top of that pasta, which is hot, warm, whatever, and it's letting out some of that aroma, some of that flavor. So if you're going to use fresh is the way to go, always the way to go. A couple other things that I mentioned, because I'm kind of backtracking on it. When I made the braciole, and I talked about putting some Parmesan cheese in it. The reason for this is because the Marzano tomato is a sweeter tomato, a full body tomato. If you're having some meat with it, and obviously the sauce is cooking into that meat, sort of the sweet and salty from the cheese will counteract each other, or basically they work together to balance the flavors. The whole idea of this dish is to balance your flavors. That's why you start with the extra virgin olive oil. That's why you start with cloves of garlic that are either minced or chopped up really fine. The whole idea is allow this to cook over time. If you're in a rush, this isn't the recipe for you. But if you have friends over on a Sunday before football and you have some time to prepare this, so it's ready for halftime. Obviously, in Vegas, games are at 10 o'clock. So start this recipe at say 9 o'clock in the morning if you can get up and do it. Anywhere else on the East Coast, you start this recipe around noon, and by halftime, you're pretty much ready to go. Especially with fresh pasta. So that's the idea. I've seen people, and we didn't do this, but when I was visiting Italy and I was at some restaurants and I tasted cheese in the sauce and I couldn't understand why. I spoke to them and found out that some places will actually put Parmesan cheese. They take the rind of the cheese and they will literally toss it in the sauce as they're building a big pot of sauce, their base or what have you. The rind, because it's so hard, does not melt, but the flavors that come out of it and the cheese sort of infuse itself into the sauce. So you can't do that by taking some Parmesan powder and putting it in. If you're at a grocery store ever and you buy some cheese, instead of buying the grated one, if you have a grater at home, buy the one that comes with a little piece of rind. You save that rind, Ziploc it, stick it in the fridge, and one day when you actually need it, when you're preparing the sauce, you toss it in during that. I'll be back with the pasta portion and then the recipe to all of this. All right, so we are now at the sauce is just about done. We're just about 3.5 hours that it's been cooking. We're boiling, stir. We stir it occasionally just to make sure it doesn't obviously burn. We're gonna add like the parsley now, the Italian parsley. So what you're gonna want to do is use half of what you allotted. I think I said it was half a cup or so. So you're gonna use a quarter cup in there. We're gonna sprinkle some on at the end. And then we have the basil, fresh basil as well too. We're going to toss that in. This is going to add sort of the last level of flavor to the sauce. I'm going to stir it in. And the sauce is really thickened up now. The meat, I tested a little bit of it. It is cooked. So we're going to leave that for about 10-15 minutes max, just to get the flavors together. The water, as you can see, which is steaming, is boiling for the pasta sauce. You want to use sea salt. I like sea salt. We have a market in the lower part of Toronto, which is called St. Lawrence Market. It has a lot of independent retailers down there. Fresh, and there's one that does spices, and they have like a Himalayan salt. The Himalayan salt is actually really good as far as like flavor goes. So salt your water pretty good. Another trick that you want to do is, well, two things. Number one is your fresh pasta, if you're putting it in, as opposed to the boxed pasta, which Kelly will tell you is absolute trash. The fresh pasta, you've got to stir it quickly. It only takes about 3 to 4 minutes for it to cook. Keep a little bit of the water. Grab even a coffee mug and grab a little bit of the water out of there because it has the starch that comes out of the pasta, number one. So keep that to the side because when you're putting the dish together at the end, if it looks like it's a little bit dry, you can add that salted water with the starch in it in order to sort of hydrate it a little bit more. Number one. Number two, if you use a colander to empty out your pasta from the pot, do not, and I repeat, do not, my God, this has got to be the most frustrating thing. Do not wash your pasta. Do not run cold water over it. It's the dumbest thing you can do. Why is it the dumbest thing you can do? Let me explain to you why. The pasta has starch on it. You're not washing off the starch, okay? you need that on the pasta because when you apply the sauce, it's going to stick to your pasta noodles, the fettuccine, spaghetti, rigatoni, whatever it is. Um, if you go anywhere or if you've ever made pasta and you sort of rinse the pasta in the colander and then you put sauce on, you're like, why doesn't the sauce stick to my pasta? Because you washed out the starch. What the hell, man? Keep your pasta away from the rinser on your sink or what have you, all right? So don't rinse it out. And we'll go to the last step in a minute, and then we'll be done, and I'll put the recipe up. All right, the second last segment of this before the recipe goes up is I call this the Marco D'Angelo segment. When you're talking about your noodles, and this is pasta noodles, we talk about how you got to cook them. So one of the biggest things is to make sure that you don't overcook your noodle. Obviously, when they come out, you grab them, try them out. You want them al dente because once you put the sauce on them, they're going to continue to cook even after you take them out of the water. As Marco says, men, if you're preparing pasta for your women, do not give them a limp noodle. That is, quote, 2020 Marco D'Angelo. I'll be back with the finished product. All right, we're at the final part of this video. Everything has been plated. I'll have some pictures up of what everything looks like. This is the pasta dish. I think you can see it there. It's all ready. I'll have some pictures of everything and then the recipe at the end of the video. I want to thank you guys for watching. Cheers. I'm going to introduce you to my producer for this. She is 20 and a half years old. Her name is Spritzer. And she does my WNBA picks. So Spritz, did you have a good time? She had a great time. Thanks for watching, guys, and I'll put together another video soon.